This is a video about how to take good pictures of cars. And this is really aimed at the beginner to intermediate skill level folks that might not have a lot of photography experience, because the things I'm going to talk about apply whether you're using a legit professional camera or your smartphone. A lot of these things still apply. I do encourage you to use a real camera because you have the ability to use optical zoom to step further back and zoom in, which helps the proportions. And you can use filters like a polarizer, which is very helpful for managing reflections. But I'll go over some of the key points right now. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention that this video isn't so much about how to use a camera or what settings to use or any of the technical side. It's really more about how to set the scene and how to pay attention to the details that are going to produce great images no matter what you're using. I feel that these things are the most important foundation to build on, because even if you just went out and bought the latest, greatest, expensive, fancy camera, if you're not setting up the scene properly, your pictures still aren't going to be that great. So with that in mind, let's get started. The first point, which should be pretty obvious, is that you want to start off with as clean a car as possible. So take your time detailing it, like I've done with this car. You may have seen my previous videos detailing this Alfa Romeo, and this is the one we're going to be shooting. But secondly, location and time of day are paramount. So do your research, drive around your town, look on Google Maps or Street View, and come up with some good ideas for places that make sense for this car. So this being a small red Italian convertible, I'm going to go to the beach. I mean, where else would you go? And of course I live near the beach, which you might not have that luxury, but I'm sure you have some interesting photogenic spots around your area. Now you might be tempted to go shoot photos whenever it's convenient for you, and that might be in the middle of the day, but you're not really going to get great results that way. It's going to look okay, but when the sun is high in the sky, it's too direct and looks kind of boring. So what you really want is a more oblique angle of the sun, by which I mean the light is washing across the car and not shining directly at it. So golden hour, you've probably heard that term. That's usually the first hour of the day when the sun is about to rise and just risen, and then of course the end of the day when it's setting and just set. Those are great times for car pictures. The next point I'll talk about is, once you get to your photo spot, I'll go over some tips on how to stage the car in a way that looks good and what to look out for in the background and the environment, and little things with the car that you'll want to adjust. And finally, I'll talk about some tips for editing and touching up the pictures after the fact to really make them pop. So, without further ado, let's go to the beach.
Later that same evening.
Greetings from the beach. So obviously rule number one is to start out with as clean a car as possible, and then bring all your cleaning stuff with you, because the car is going to get dirty and dusty just driving to your photo spot. So bring some glass cleaner, some exterior detailer, some clean microfiber cloths, anything you think you might need. Also try to make sure things are even, like visors. You don't want one down and the other up. You don't want to have a window partway down. And on a convertible, I would suggest taking pictures with the top up first, assuming that you store it with the top up, because at that point there won't be any wrinkles in it. But once you take the top down and then put it back up, there will be some wrinkles for a while until they smooth out again. You should also consider which way to turn the wheels when you're parking. You either want them to be completely straight, or you want them to be turned so that the front of the wheel is facing the camera. You don't want to see tire tread, you'd rather see the wheel, especially if they're cool wheels. That's something nice to feature. Another thing on convertibles, it's really a pet peeve of mine when you see a car with the top down and the windows up. That just looks ridiculous. Roll the windows down. So once you get to your spot and set it up, you'll want to walk around and figure out where the best light is coming from. So obviously right here looks terrible. From the side is decent, but it's a little too direct. Direct sun is kind of harsh, isn't that flattering. But if we come off to the side here, we get the glinting of the sort of oblique angle of the sun. We still get the nice red paint, but it's not so direct. And we got the ocean in the background. I think this is our shot right here. So you'll also want to avoid any distracting background elements. Sometimes you have no control over it, but you can hide them with the car itself by moving around. And just keep an eye on your framing and try different things. Get low, squat down, get on the level of the car, and the good shots will come. And even by using different lenses, getting further away and zooming in, you can kind of compress that background and avoid any elements you don't want, like that tent back there and some of the people that you don't want in the shot. Something I try to do when I'm watching out for background elements that are distracting is to try to keep a clean silhouette of the car. So try to avoid anything behind the car that breaks up the lines of the body and the top. You want to have the car contrast and separate itself from the background and not have anything sticking out behind it. Something else to look out for is reflections in the paint. So you're not only trying to avoid distracting background elements, but you also have to think of, what's on the other side of the car, and am I going to see that? Is it going to be distracting? So you might have to move around a bit and keep an eye on the reflections. When you have some sharp body lines like this Alpha does on the side, it helps to try to avoid any reflections above that line. So I got lucky a few times here where I was able to crouch down and move all the reflections of trees and other stuff down below, so you have a really crisp line where that crease is in the body. This is what's known as a circular polarizer, or CPL filter. It's basically like sunglasses for your camera, and what makes this essential for car photography is it allows you to manage reflections. So unlike the sunglasses on your face, you can actually rotate this and it changes the direction of the polarization. So maybe I can show you here, see how much reflection and glare is on the car here. If I hold this up and rotate it, you can see those reflections go away almost entirely. So it's a very handy tool to manipulate those if you don't want the reflections and glare. Sometimes you do want reflections because it emphasizes how shiny the car is, so great tool to have. You don't always have to use it, but highly recommended. Here are a couple of clips of me playing around with it on my camera at the beach and showing the huge difference it makes in the reflections on the car. If you can bring a second person along with you on the shoot, whether it's the owner or a friend, and they can hold on to one of these, it can be a very handy tool to lighten up those dark areas. So I got the car here, and you can see the sun is kind of behind it. If I move this in and kind of play around with it, you see how much it brightens up the side of the car here? So it can be a very powerful way to light up the dark areas. That's more natural than trying to do it after the fact like I did. And actually, an even bigger reflector than this would probably be better. This is just a cheap one that I got. Look at how much I can influence the light on this wheel just by moving this reflector into the right position. I just have it over here and I'm kind of rocking it back and forth. Now you might start having issues with seeing the reflections of it in the paint, but that's a whole nother story. Here's an example of a car shoot I did where I did have a second person with me, and this first picture was done with no reflector. You can see the front end is pretty dark, but in the second example I had the guy hold the reflector, and it really helps lighten up the grille and kind of highlight the chrome and stuff. The only issue is you can see there's a bit of a bright spot on the hood, but that's something that could be manually edited later. But try to cover all the angles. The front shot, side shots, 3/4 view from all angles, low, high, close, far away. One thing you might wonder is, how many pictures do I need? Well, it really depends on what your goals are for the photo shoot. If you're just doing it for fun and you want some nice glamour shots of your car, do whatever you want, it's all good. But if you're doing what I'm doing and trying to sell this car, it depends on where and how you're marketing it. If you're just advertising locally on Craigslist or Facebook or wherever, a good handful is fine. You want some nice exterior shots and you want to show every part of the car, like the interior, the engine bay, things like that. But, 20 pictures is plenty. If you are a little bit fancier and you want to auction it off, especially on a high-end site like Bring a Trailer, you'll need over 100 pictures, 150. I've sold a couple cars on Bring a Trailer, and it's great to have a variety. People aren't going to come see the car in person most likely, so you need to show all the details, all the little flaws, paint chips, dents, pits in the chrome. You want to show the whole undercarriage, any rust, multiple angles of the engine bay, decals, VIN number, stampings, anything that's relevant or important. So keep that in mind. It all depends on how you're advertising it. For things like the engine and interior, I definitely suggest doing those in the full shade because you don't want super bright sun on half of it and shade on the other. That's gonna make it difficult to see. So let's say we really like this angle, but we've gotten all the pictures we can. There's no reason you can't just flip the car around and do the same thing from the other direction. You're definitely gonna have to move several times in order to get a good collection of pictures from different angles, so don't be afraid to move it around. But again, just standing here looking at this looks like a good picture. And if I move over here, obviously got to avoid my own shadow, but this is a pretty good picture too. What tends to happen at the end of the day is the light's just going to keep getting better and better. And if you got there a little bit early and found the best angles, the best place to put the car, the best techniques and everything, by the time the best light arrives, you should be ready for it. And that's when the great shots come and you can get stuff like this. Well, I think that pretty much sums it up. As long as you set yourself up for success by going to a good location at the right time of day and just experiment around. A lot of this is experimentation, just moving the car around to different spots, trying different angles, turning the wheels. After a while, you'll start to figure out what works and what doesn't, and probably develop your own special style. So of course, there's a lot more you can do with editing, but I just wanted to show some basic tips for shooting and how to get the best results out of the camera, even if you don't have a fancy camera. So I hope this helped, and now from here I'm going to move on and market this car for sale, and I do think we're going to get a good result. We set ourselves up for success, so what could possibly go wrong? Anyway, thanks for watching.